The intention for this gathering is for us to talk about mission-centric ministry and the emerging paradigm for our New Thought movement of moving into mission-centric ministry. And what better person to talk about it than Dr. Gary Simmons? So, Gary, thank you for joining me on Facebook Live today.
I'm excited about being a part of this, and it's important that we get the word out about mission-centric ministry. Part of our challenge in New Thought is that we're seeing such a decline in our ministries being able to sustain themselves, and so we're really needing to migrate to some form of sustainable ministry practice that enables us to manage these changing times. And so resilience, flexibility, being capable of really having a kind of holistic approach to ministry. These are all a part of this arena of mission-centric ministry. We're excited to be talking about it.
And Gary, talk a little bit about what brought you into this mission-centric approach and how it's different from maybe what you've done in the past.
Okay, so most people are familiar with the pilot program, the transformation experience, our effort to field test in 13 ministries, a new paradigm of ministry based on the integral model of ministry, which is a holistic context for understanding how consciousness, culture, relationships, and organizational practice constitute the whole that ministry is. And if we're going to develop or evolve, we have to have a holistic approach to moving our ministry into modern times. Basically, we're currently practicing a model of ministry that's over 400 years old, and everything else is changing. And so, so I got excited about your work, because SpiritGroups and transformation should be considered synonymous. And if we're interested in really moving into a ministry that's relevant to our times, transformation. And the question I ask: are you on the transition team yet for the world? And so transformation is at the core of that. And if our ministries aren't really grounded in an organizational context for transforming lives, or for transcending just the Sunday worship, pay, pray, and plop paradigm of ministry, if we want to break free from that, we have to have a different concept of what ministry is, and certainly it has to live beyond Sunday.
Right, absolutely. So I'm really glad that you're here to be able to talk about this in terms of not just what is it, because I think it's easy to say mission-centric ministry. And it's like, oh yeah, I know that. You just have a mission statement, you say it over and over again, and that's mission-centric ministry. And we're talking about something totally different. So I'm glad to have you here to talk about that. I know for me, I kind of came in the back door as I was looking at living in Texas, where there's mega churches everywhere, and thinking, what are they doing differently than what I'm seeing in New Thought? Because as I was speaking in New Thought churches, I was seeing all this struggle, people just trying to keep the doors open, and that not enoughness. And so I started going to these mega churches, seeing what do they do, and what I saw was infrastructure, specifically the small groups. And I thought, well, if I do the small group thing, that's the key. And what I realized is it's not just the small groups thing; it's the small groups paradigm tied to an overarching mission with values that drive that mission. So we're on the same page in terms of that's where it begins, is really having that sense of being mission driven. So talk about the difference, because it is a paradigm shift between mission-centric ministry and what most of us have practiced in the past in New Thought.
Okay, so it's very easy for us to understand that our current model of ministry is built around the minister as being the central glue, the binding force for the community. And so our understanding is that this, while can create a tremendously intimate and close-knit community, it has many unintended consequences associated with it. Many consequences, such as difficulty in transitioning from one minister to the next. In other words, when the minister is perceived as ostensibly the extended parent of the organization, when that person moves on, it sets the ministry back. The Pareto's principle, the 80% rule, where 20% provide 80% of the resources, is indicative of the minister-centric model of ministry. The family system dynamics, the dysfunction associated with having a community built around the whole idea that the ministers are surrogate parents, and we're children within this, and so we We have those dynamics. We have all kinds of dynamics with respect to the organization. Our organization is structured primarily to support our Sunday worship experience. One of the things that you mentioned about spirit groups as a concept, it's not new to New Thought, as many know already. But what's unique about spirit groups in your research is that it's not just a bolt-on program, or just not an activity that you attach to whatever else is going on. We're talking about restructuring the entire ministry to support a mission fulfillment paradigm or imperative that not only spirit groups but also the mission-centric model of ministry requires, that there be a coherence around creating an organizational structure that empowers this mission fulfillment principle.
So yeah, I agree with you in terms of the mission-centric model. It is, it's not just having a good mission statement that you say over and over again. It's an infrastructure shift. It's a paradigm shift in terms of the organizational structure, and that's I think that's the greatest challenge, is to step into a paradigm that I don't think we've experienced in the past in New Thought.
And part of the challenge with for folks who aren't really for folks who are just learning about the mission-centric model of ministry, part of the challenge is it's hard to wrap our awareness around what exactly that means to us, and so it's important for people to understand that we're talking about a total restructuring of our organization to support a way of delivering our mission that really impacts the world. And so when we talk about mission-centric, we're also talking about cultivating greater ownership, cultivating greater emotional and spiritual maturity within the congregation. We're also talking about establishing greater integrity with respect to roles and accountabilities, because the transitioning from minister-centric to mission-centric requires a kind of maturity with respect to our not only our spiritual practice but our organizational practice that basically is quite different than what we're used to in our traditional pastor flock or minister-centric model of ministry. I mean, for instance, just take for example how board members are recruited. In the minister-centric model of ministry, if you have a pulse and you're breathing, well, then you're qualified. And then you're introduced to whatever is happening on the board, and you find that you can't unknow certain things once you arrive on the board. Well, this practice doesn't work in the mission-centric model at all, because people in the mission-centric ministry have the same level of, ostensibly, the ideal is that when we cultivate ownership, we're cultivating people's capacity to serve in key leadership roles. So how can we create a seamless program from first-timer to competent leader? And so if we think about an intentional pathway from someone walking in the door till eventually find themselves in service on our board or as a credentialed leader, if we don't have an intentional program for cultivating this, then it happens by accident. There's nothing in the mission-centric model of ministry that happens by accident. It's all intentional, it's all conscious, and it's all linked to transforming lives or whatever is the mission of the ministry.
Yeah, I love the idea of an intentional path, because when you're using this model, it actually simplifies things considerably, because you're able to measure the things that you're doing and say, is this contributing to that mission? And I think the key where it begins is simplifying the mission. That the mission statement doesn't have to be this long, flowery thing that sounds good but isn't really actionable. Talk a little bit about your experience, because your ministry brought you in to make that shift to mission-centric. Right. So talk about what your process has been in terms of the mission itself.
Okay, so when we were hired, Jan and I were hired, we put forth our 5-year plan to move the ministry from the minister-centric ministry practice to mission-centric. And so part of that work was recrafting their mission statement. And so so what happened is that we discovered that no one knew what the mission of the ministry was when we arrived. No one on the board who were interviewing us, and even so anyway, someone found the mission and printed on a brochure about 5 or 6 years old, and so we decided that it was more important, rather than to create our mission, vision, strategic plan right up front in the beginning, was that we needed to be able to practice what it feels like to live on purpose, or to live in the context of a purpose that is moving us into a greater expression of who and what we've come here to be as a ministry. And absent of that, them having that experience of being able to embody a purpose, how could we adopt a mission and then expect the organization to be crafted around that? And so we announced very early on, we're going to have a practice mission statement. And that mission statement is transforming lives. And then when someone said, oh, we need a little bit more fluff to it, okay, well, we'll go ahead and add, and inspiring people to make a positive difference in the world. But the point is that transforming lives became something that was so powerful and easily experienced by the people who are especially engaged in the Q process, the art and practice of living with nothing and no one against you, our shadow work piece, which right now in our ministry, over 250 people have been through that program. And the impact of that in the context of our mission-centric transition process is that people know what it feels like to have their lives transformed. And so consequently, everybody feels that we are not just have a mission, but we are living our mission. Everyone is an example of what it means to live on purpose in the context of our spiritual journey. And so our adoption of a mission statement was in the context of learning how to practice what it feels like to embody, to inhabit our purpose. And then I said, after we've all agreed that we've accomplished this, then we'll be in the question, well, do we need to have a different mission statement that you all want to create for your ministry? Because this is your church. And we'll wait and see what happens. My sense is that no one's going to touch what we've already started.
Right. Well, what's powerful about it, transforming lives, it's powerful and it's simple, so that when you're communicating it, it's easy to tie in every Sunday that this is about transformation. It ties into your Sunday talks. It ties into the additional programs, the art and practice programs. You can say, does this program transform lives? And if so, how do we work it into the infrastructure of the church? And if not, clearly we need to start letting some of those things go that aren't transforming lives, if that's what you're here to do.
Exactly. And the neat thing about it is that it changes how we try to fund the church. In other words,
say more about that.
Okay, so we're not asking people to, tithe to where you're spiritually fed. We're not asking people to give as they have received. We're asking them to be source, to tithe as source, to be in touch with a sense of what they want to directly contribute that transforms other people's lives. And so it's really easy on Sunday mornings when we bless the love offering to invite people first to get in touch with that part of themselves where there's more than enough, to get in touch with their sense of gratitude and appreciation for what they've experienced in the context of what transformation has happened in their own personal life. And if they want to see that happen for other people, to give to that purpose. And so consequently, we've taken our ministry out of the tithe to where you're spiritually fed practice, which is integral to sustaining the minister-centric model of ministry, to tithe as source to what you want to see blossom and to flourish. And so consequently, our financial stability paradigm is moving from tithing to where you're spiritually fed to tithing as source. And we're also, because of our new membership system, the integral membership system, which is a phased approach to membership, we've introduced the minimum member contribution principle, which asks people basically to identify specifically what they say yes to with respect to their support of the church as a community member. We have two phases of our membership. And so we've been 2 years engaged in implementing this new membership process, and we've had not one person say no to the minimum member contribution principle. In other words, we have everybody who joins the church now not only says yes to a minimum member contribution, but they declare it. And they also say yes to deepening their own spiritual practice. And guess what? We say through SpiritGroups. And then we say in some form of meaningful service. Guess what? through spirit groups, because spirit groups has a component of giving back, of serving the community and the congregation. Spirit groups has a leadership development component. Spirit groups can be the arena within which not only lives are transformed, but any content such as new member orientation or any developmental program can be delivered through spirit groups. And so we don't have to, while we still have classes, we don't have to create classes where people have to kind of figure out what they have to take. They can get it all done through spirit groups. And so it simplifies our entire process of bringing people into a greater expression of their own spiritual awareness, as well as their involvement in our community. And get this, here's a neat thing that happened just last Sunday. Now, Tara Ware, which is our Spirit Groups program leader, we've hired this person to serve in this role, and she conducted a Spirit Groups kind of celebration after service, and honoring hosts as well as others in the church that supported the work. And then it was an opportunity for people to have a little little potluck and social time. But we had 8 new people that Sunday, and we had 8 new people to Spirit Groups that Sunday.
Wow.
So some people, especially millennials, they're all over Spirit Groups because they want to talk about stuff that bothers them. You know, I can't talk about politics from the pulpit, but they talk about it in Spirit Groups. And so it's a way for people to process the crap that's happening in this world in a way that doesn't divide people, because people in Spirit Groups align with those who are affiliated with their same interests. So it's a healthier way of dealing with the stuff that you have to deal with in church. Anyway.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Oh, that gives me little tingles. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Well, and you know, one of the things I want to point out here, because when I'm doing our Spirit Group Train the Trainers, and I talk about your phased approach to membership, which I love that model, and I talk about the idea of tithing as source and that shifting so that you're giving to the mission. You're not giving for the electricity and the minister's salary. You're giving to the mission. That if you're going to step into that conversation, and that it's not this is not a gimmick. It's not here's a great way to get people to give. When you say you're giving to the mission, it now becomes your responsibility as a leader to make sure that you're not using resources for things that are not mission appropriate.
That's
so
right.
You know, when you step into it, it kind of is like once you step in, you're in a fast moving current, and it impacts that one statement, giving as source, giving to the mission. As soon as you say that on Sunday morning, you've got to start making some infrastructure changes, because you've got to be in alignment and integrity with that. Jane says, will you say more about how you combine classes that need a teacher with Spirit Groups that only have a host? Tell us what you're doing, and then I'll add anything that is extra.
Okay, so all we're doing is, so we have in our church 5 ordained unity ministers and 2 licensed teachers. Not all of them are on staff, but we have those folks who are our licensed teachers and our minister emeritus. They enjoy teaching classes because it supplements their income, and we don't want to take that away and from these individuals. And because Spirit Groups sort of discourages their, in my opinion, rightly, content experts, because that tends to influence the outcome of people's interaction. Where in Spirit Groups, the hosts are simply hosts as opposed to content experts. Anyway, so when there's subject matter that requires a content expert, then the classes are an important vehicle for that. So, for instance, right now the Q process is a class or a workshop, and while we are hopeful to bring Spirit Groups, an element of the Q process, into a Spirit Group dynamic, it's still a ways away. So anyway, there's a give and take there that requires some transition, but I think you're the expert on that one, Mendhi. Go for it. Say more about it.
Well, I can tell you that what I see in the megachurch model is that there are workshops or classes. You know, there is that kind of infrastructure on key topics that relate to the mission. So things like sacred service, where you want to teach people about that and then get them engaged in a volunteer role. Or your tithing, your prosperity class. That might be a workshop or a Saturday one-day thing where you get people to learn about it and then to learn about the idea behind it and then make a commitment at the end. So there are certain things that are taught. I would say from what I've seen, there may be more that I haven't seen, but from what I can see, just sort of skimming the surface from my participation in these churches, is that they do have a certain number, like maybe one or two course content pieces. It's tied to the mission. So there are pieces that don't fit a small group structure. Right. What I recommend for your spirit groups is, if you have licensed teachers, that you can go through Eye of the Storm is now one of our video series. So you could potentially have a licensed teacher who is teaching specifically a leadership track. So that teacher would draw people into that spirit group that have an interest in getting credentialed and getting course credit. And then what I would do is just charge them for that credit. So the spirit group itself there's no charge for that, but if they want the credit, that you factor in a fee for your licensed teacher as well as the fee that's required for that. I also would start thinking about, as we're shifting, and again, this is a paradigm shift and a cultural shift, to start thinking about your licensed teachers and your people who have content expertise as grooming them into becoming leaders of leaders. Because these people make great program leaders. They make, as your program grows, you need mentors for your group leaders. And they'll have the consciousness and the ability to coach and to mentor people as your program expands. So that's my thought. So thank you for that question, Jane. That is fabulous. We're talking with Dr. Gary Simmons, and I'm Mendhi Audlin, founder of the Spirit Groups program. Gary, can you talk a little bit about the infrastructure shift? Because it does require different systems than a more traditional path for ministry.
Okay, so I'll talk about that. But first, I wanted to comment about what you mentioned earlier about how the mission informs much of the organizational life. So, for instance, many churches, especially well-established churches, probably have a facility that is not fully used by your community, and which is a predicament that many of our New Thought churches are in. So consequently, they see that as a way of leveraging their facility to get some more income. But many churches find themselves leased out of their own space, and insofar as their efforts to try to manage and sustain their existence, because they have this space, and why not get some money? But the question I have then is that, is your mission to be property managers? And so part of our challenge is we are dealing with the same issue. We have a very large facility, and now it's used every single day of the week. We probably have about 20 different groups that use our facility. And we were in this question, are we really in the business of managing property? Is that our mission? No, it's transforming lives. Well, then how can we manage our facility to have renters that are aligned with our mission, transforming lives? So, so consequently, we have, just really made a commitment to only host those groups or activities that are directly aligned with our efforts to really move people into a greater expression of their well-being and worth. So, it makes a difference. So, infrastructure-wise, what has been a necessity for us is that we had to hire a person who spends a little less than 18 hours a week working on spirit groups, coordinating all of the activities, the programs, the scheduling of things, the training of hosts, the resolving of interpersonal difficulties, and doing all the celebrations. I mean, and it is a job, and if the ministry is wanting success, then that's part of the infrastructure, is to make sure your people have all the support that's needed in order for them to be effective. If it's a volunteer, making sure that that volunteer has the support that he or she needs. And so we've had to allocate and budget funds. In addition to the salary, we budget funds to be able to engage in the programs that you offer, Mendhi, through Spirit Groups, as well as the online support for the implementation, which is absolutely critical and integral to a successful rollout. And then also we've had to see ourselves thinking in terms of our leadership development in the context of Spirit Groups. So what kind of infrastructure is needed with respect to that? And how does our board really come into alignment with supporting. And so here's the thing: absent of the minister and the leadership fully all in this work, it's just not going to take off. What'll happen is that you have a really nice launch. It'll be a really cool program, but it'll die if it's not really owned by the leadership of this church. And once you see that it's not so much, it's harder to think in terms of creating an infrastructure around spirit groups or around mission fulfillment. It's not so much it's harder, it's just different. We're just not used to thinking this way. And that's what we need: a new paradigm, a new training, a new education around this work, so that people understand it and see it's not so much that it's harder, it's just different. And we need to be able to engage that.
Absolutely. So, yeah, one of the things that I noticed that's very different in these mega churches is that they budget a tremendous amount of time and energy and resources in the professional development of their team, the personal and professional development. So the Spirit Group program is a leadership development program. And that's, I think, different than anything we've done before. We have a fall program, and it's a program, and it goes, and everyone has a good time, and then we don't do it again until next fall. This is not that at all. This is infrastructure for leadership development. And
well,
we've got a question.
I want to add to what you said previously. I'm sort of running a little bit behind your comments, but one of the things that we had to do differently structurally in terms of infrastructure, this goes to that, one more comment about that, is that Jane and I have had to change the way we speak on Sunday. In other words, we've had to shift from translational teachings to transformative teachings. And so basically, very simply, translational versus transformational was first coined by Ken Wilber, and later Robert Brummett wrote a great article on the distinction between the two. Translational teachings typically are core unity or new thought teachings. We basically teach people how to translate, or rather reframe their life so it looks and feels better for them, so that they feel more resourceful or better about things. Well, transformational teachings are different. They move us towards our discomfort so that we can birth a greater reality, and that's a different context. And in some ways, it's necessary for us as ministers to make that shift as well. So from the pulpit, we're teaching people, and then they take. Every Sunday have questions that we ask the spirit groups who are working the content of the Sunday service. They take into their spirit groups questions from our talks to deepen their experience. And so it means that our Sunday message is amplified in a depth that we cannot in 20, 25 minutes accomplish on Sunday mornings. Mm-hmm. And so this is a huge thing. And it drives people to spirit groups because they want to talk about what they hear on Sunday. And there's no venue for it other than spirit groups. It's so cool.
That's so great. So I have a question for you. This is from Charlotte. So welcome, Charlotte. Thanks for joining us live. She said, would you talk about the essential characteristics of leadership or congregational membership that would indicate when a ministry is receptive to transitioning to a mission-centered paradigm? How do we determine readiness? Great question. How would you answer that? What do you think?
If you're in the question, you're ready to me. And I mean, for instance, I do an all-day program, a workshop, where I basically teach new thought leaders what is not working in our current ministry practice. And once you really hear a complete explanation of all the unintended consequences, almost without exception, people don't want to stick with what they're doing. They want to transition to this new paradigm. The challenge is that we don't have a lot of roadmaps for transitioning. We do know what a mission-centric ministry looks like in terms of your research, Mendhi, and we know the elements that are integral to its sustainability. But what we have yet to really unlock is the rocket science between migrating new thought churches, which are quite different than the traditional churches, from minister-centric to mission-centric. So you and I are, and a handful of others are trying to break through and figure this out. And we're starting our third year, and what we figured out so far is really working. So So we're all in on this, and we're wanting to communicate this. There's light at the end of this tunnel, and
Yeah.
get on board, because the train's leaving the station.
Yeah. And I would say, Charlotte, that what I found is that people in the ministry want this. They want the infrastructure, they want the connection, they want the systems and the structure. So it's not just, oh, there's all these different things, but there's a system and a focus, so that they feel like their participation is not just feeding them, but it's feeding them because they're making a difference in the world.
Exactly.
And people want that. They want to make a difference, and they want to have connections and friendships that are far beyond what you can experience having coffee with someone on Sunday morning. It's the kind of relationships that you build when you connect with people over time in a very intimate setting. The congregations want that. The question is your leadership ready to transition?
Yeah,
because that's the big thing.
Yeah, exactly. When I'm when I do these trainings, I have 100 Unity leaders or New Thought leaders in the room, and basically I say, you guys are in the way of this, not your congregation, because it's the leadership that have the most difficulty in getting a handle around doing something that is quite counterintuitive in some respects, and quite different than from what they are used to. And so typically, leaders that are embedded in the minister-centric model of ministry, they are driven by predict and control imperatives. And so change is a challenge for almost all churches. But the reality is that when you're moved from minister-centric to mission-centric, change is the name of what's going on. And so that's why we have a transition plan. That's why we have taken all the efforts to make sure that we grow the emotional and spiritual maturity of the congregation before we create huge shifts. That's why we bring SpiritGroups online early, so people have a powerful experience of what it means to transform their lives, what it means to be in a sacred community with one another. And that's why we are able to shift our funding strategy, because this is what people want. They actually want that. The other thing, too, is that what I found is that people want to be told what it means to be in integrity in their relationship to the church in the context of their financial support. So we are living in a kind of myth message. We're living in a kind of a virtual reality that isn't aligned with what's happening in the real world with respect to what our congregations want from the leaders. So this is a wake-up call. We either wake up or we become irrelevant.
Exactly. And we had, so our first small group leadership summit was hosted last June at Unity Village Chapel. And we had a lot of ministers there, a lot of program leaders, a few group leaders were there. And there were some people there that were just kind of like, what is this small groups thing? I want to learn more about it. And we had gone through an entire weekend. It's Friday nights, all day Saturday. Sunday morning, we were doing this Q&A session. And so we've been talking about, how the old paradigm is needs to slide away. It's not working. We're talking about this new paradigm of being on purpose, being mission-centric. And we had a young woman there in her 20s who had been just kind of quiet and listening the whole time. She was new to it, wanted to check it out because she had wanted to do a group at her church. So her minister sent her just to go check it out. And she stood up and passionately said, this is exactly what my generation is looking for. Yes. We don't want to just come and hear a minister on Sunday morning. That does nothing for them. They want to have friends. They want to get connected. They want to make a difference in their communities. And she said, this is what we're looking for. Just do this. And so, it's out there. This is what they want, but it requires us as leaders to step outside of the paradigm we know, to be on the leading edge. I mean, I tell you, I don't know about you, Gary, but the past few years, I just feel like I have been stretched in terms of the technology, in terms of the mindset. It is a huge stretch, and we've got to be willing to go there in order to lead the movement there. So it's really up to us. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to add that, the whole idea of millennials, has been such a big, the myth is that, if we just get millennials, we'll save our church, Well, the reality is that millennials are not going to fund our ministry. That's just not in their nature. That they bring something different, and the difference that they bring is integral to our success, our sustainability, and especially if we're interested in mission-centric ministry. But the engagement of millennials, as you've mentioned, is bringing the ministry in alignment with them as opposed to forcing them to align with us, which is the big mistake that so many churches make. They say, oh, we need more young people, and they have a congregation that's aging out, and they don't know how to bring more young people in. And Spirit Groups has that figured out for them. So you don't. It's not like you have to create something special for that.
Spirit Groups is the infrastructure in terms of it gives you the leadership development track. So that's why it's such a critical piece. It's not that, oh yeah, we want people to connect, although people do connect in their Spirit Groups. It creates a track through which you can develop leaders from the moment they walk in the door, having never heard of New Thought, to getting them into a group where they make friends, they learn things, they step into group leadership, they step into mentorship, and they step into leadership as your chaplains, as your board members. So there's an entire engagement process that happens through the groups that when you don't have a small groups infrastructure, not talking about fall series, a year-round small groups infrastructure that is on purpose, mission-centric, if you don't have that, I have not seen any other model for giving you the ability to develop leaders. So that's why it is such an important piece. So talk about the success you've seen. What's happened at your church since you've started doing this?
Okay, so it's helpful for everybody to understand that our Spirit Groups is embedded in our 5-year plan as a component, integral component. And there are 3 other integral components in addition to Spirit Groups that kind of create a context for it. The first, as I've already mentioned, is the Q process, or the art and practice of living with nothing and no one against you, our shadow work program. That's integral to our shift because you have to cultivate emotional and spiritual maturity before people can engage the change process. And that means they have to be comfortable with the discomfort of change and transformation, especially in the transition from minister-centric to mission-centric. The second component, of course, is Spirit Groups, as I've already mentioned, is integral to the delivery of the fulfillment of our mission, giving people the direct experience of their lives being transformed, and also driving the organizational changes and shifts that are integral to our transition to a new organizational practice. In addition to that is the integral membership process, which is focused on cultivating ownership, a seamless program from first-timer to competent leader in our ministry. It has 2 phases. First phase is community member, and the second phase is governing member, where there is the vote. And so that's integral to our process, and they're all linked. The Q process, emotional and spiritual maturity, the integral membership system, Spirit Groups are all interconnected because they're all dependent upon one another. And then the fourth component is mind movies. It's a new technology. Everyone's familiar with treasure maps and the whole process of manifesting a greater good by conditioning your awareness to have a picture of something that's desired. But mind movie process, as we link it to a transformative practice, helps us not only attract the millennials who are all over that technology, but it gives us a way of helping the congregation have a more profound spiritual experience of transformation when they're using their whole body. In other words, our body-mind is just as important part of our spiritual process and healing work as our consciousness. And so we're using this technology not only to help engage the young people and help us manifest a greater good, but the mind movie system is going to be our visioning process. And there's a whole module on how to do vision work with technology that I'm developing as well. But anyway, the 4 elements of this program represent the external imperatives that we have: the art and practice, the Spirit Groups, the integral membership system, and mind movies. And then there's the whole infrastructure part, which has to do with our really looking at the organization and things like, where do we leak energy as an organization? Well, you leak energy as an organization wherever you are doing something that is not linked to an intentional aim that is for mission fulfillment. And so there are nuances that we can't discuss in this short 1 hour conversation, but these nuances offer a kind of colorful spectrum with respect to how this program is scalable to any size ministry and how it can be implemented with relatively ease with all the support that's available. So there's really no reason why a ministry that has the intention cannot move towards a greater expression of this more current and relevant ministry practice.
Gary, you had said something about the idea of moving people, so they're having an experience of your mission, transforming lives. They're moving into a group, they're having an experience of that. And what I love about the mission of transforming lives is we move them in to have the experience, and then as we cultivate leaders, we can teach them how to be people that transform lives. So
exactly.
There's the receivership of it, and then from that experience, we move them into a place where they now become the ones who are creating transformation. It's not just the minister's job to make that mission come alive. It's everybody's, if you're a member of your ministry, then you have taken on that mission of, I'm someone who can transform people's lives. And I can do that by hosting a group or by mentoring a group leader.
That's right. And when you think about all the things that are Sunday dependent, I mean, every time you make an announcement or you take up a love offering, it's like your payday is Sunday, and our attention and effort is given to completely almost Sunday. And when we consider how through spirit groups our announcements are conveyed, through spirit groups prayer requests are received and dealt with. When we see service happening through spirit groups and their involvement in the church and beyond in the community, when we see people and their testimonies, I mean, we record everything and collect all these testimonies of how their experience with strangers has opened their hearts and their minds to new ideas and new vistas. There's no downside to this other than starting it and just not having the will or the wherewithal to have an effective launch. And so that's what we want to support, is people's effectiveness in this work.
Yeah. So we have through trial and error, through study of mega churches and using that as a model, and then bringing that into our New Thought community and testing it and tweaking it and rolling it out. And Gary, you're one of the pioneers in this, and the things that you've brought to it have made it so much, stronger. And every time we have a success, we're building upon the success of the program, so that when you're new to this, there is infrastructure that is already in place, that the only thing you really have to do is be willing to step into a new paradigm and resist the temptation to want to. Yeah, I see people that want to take that old paradigm and just kind of stuff it in there just a little bit. So, to really trust that it's set up very intentionally in order to help you create that shift into a mission-centric.
Yeah, the last thing one thing I would like to say just before we end it here is that, there's different attitudes out there. So I meet ministers that say, well, we'll give this a try. When someone says we'll give it a try, I know it won't work, because it just doesn't work when you just give it a try. But when the ministers say, I'm going to make this work, this is what I want, it's going to work, that's when it works. And so it's really a choice. You really have to be clear that this is something that is really integral to your future, your success, your capacity to really make a difference in people's lives, because we're running out of things to add to our programs and activities that are going to keep people happy and fund our organization. So stop sending out surveys asking what people support. Give them something that's going to transform their life, because they'll never regret it. You'll be so far better off.
Well, and I love the fact that, Gary, you have set this out. This is a 3 to 5 year transitional process. So we are talking about a cultural shift, and that requires a high degree of discernment. Like, you have been very intentional about starting with the practice mission, and we're going to do this for a while, and then we're going to, we have the groups, and then we're going to look at that practice mission. So you're doing it in stages, so you're not just throwing everything out and like, here's the new thing. Right. And they know that this is the path that we're on, and we're on it for the long term, because you realize that that's how you shift culture is over time.
Yeah, and so most people know me for over the years that I've been theorizing about this new model of ministry, and so the big criticism has been, well, it's all theory, and where's it in practice? And so this is what Jane and I are doing. We're putting it into practice, and so far it's exceeded our expectations. And so it's we're just here trying to figure this thing out, and I think that we're onto something, and we just want to spread the word. That's where we're coming from. I mean, it's not like this is going to replace our day job, but we're here to support our colleagues and ministry friends. But it takes a commitment. We can't push the river. We're sort of going downstream, going with this flow. We feel that the current is taking us into meaningful, relevant places and opportunities, but it's going to take all of us to really create a momentum that makes a difference and shifts the tide.
Absolutely. So thank you, Gary, for being in the conversation, because I share that passion for, let's just, we got to get the word out there and let people know that there is a system. I hear people still scratching their head like, we just got to figure out what that thing is that's going to make the difference. Well, we figured it out, and it's just a matter of implementing it and giving it the time to bloom and blossom and come to fruition.
Can I do a commercial? So
sure,
I want to let everybody know that I do an all-day program, 6-hour program that presents the mission-centric new paradigm in ministry that includes an in-depth explanation as to how SpiritGroups really is integral to that whole process. And it talks also about those 4 components of what we're using as our drivers for the mission-centric model. And I'm available to come out to sub-regional events. It's very affordable if you can get 4 or 5 churches and come together, and it's easily carries the expense of that. You can follow my blog at drgarysimmons.com. When I do post, you can subscribe and get it directly sent to you. And once we get this, once we have a real clarity around everybody understanding what mission-centric ministry is, people will then be able to take the next step and see that it's really about transforming their ministry. And so there's help and there's support. It's just that you have to want it and you have to get it.
Well, I have one final question, and it's from Judy Beach, and I know the answer to it, so I really want to throw it in there because I think it's such a paradigm shift. I want to have you respond to this. So Judy asks, in forming your practice mission statement, who was involved?
Me. Just me.
No big committee? No. Weeks and weeks.
No, I just told them that we're just going to have a practice mission statement for a while until we learn what it feels like to be on purpose, and everybody said, "Okay."
Yeah.
But so
not everything needs full consensus. Yeah. So talk about sort of the balance between getting, buy-in and also as a leader, because this is stepping into leadership as the spiritual leader.
Right.
Yeah, talk about that just briefly.
So we had to present our 5-year plan. In other words, they had to buy into that in terms of hiring us. So if they weren't going to buy into that plan, then we wouldn't be suitable people. And so we had, in the sense of ostensibly, they are saying yes anyway. And so they wanted me to proceed. And so I did so under their support. And basically, it is appropriate for the minister to establish a leadership direction and to assert themselves, as well as take responsibility for the flack of what might inadvertently get created as an unintended consequence of that initiative. So I didn't have any unintended consequences of my initiative, but it might be different for anyone who's an established church. Best behavior might be not helpful. And so the best way is, let me convince your leadership, not you try. Come to an event that I am hosting or Mindy is hosting. Let us convince your leadership. Don't try to do it yourself. We know how to do it.
Yeah, that's good. So Gary has his mission-centric programs that are fantastic. Bring some churches together in your area. Bring Gary out, and that'll be a huge wake up call. So I want to thank all of you. I'm getting lots of thank yous, Gary. Thank you from our Facebook comments. Thank you to all of you who have joined us live, and continue this archive. The comments can continue. So if you have, we'll look forward to seeing you next time.
Prosper.
Blessings. Bye bye.